psychologist Dr. Martin Seligman, he's sometimes called like the father of happy psychology, has made a career out of studying happiness, and out of studying happiness. And what he's seen is that he can break people up into basically three categories, right? This is interviewing and working with thousands of people. There are the people that are seeking happiness predominantly through pleasure, right? So that's category number one. The people that are like, okay, you know, I get the way this works. Like the idea is to produce as many pleasurable moments as possible. So whether that's, you know, going on vacations, getting massages, taking intoxicants, having lots of sexual relations, accumulating lots of stuff because it feels good in the moment to buy things, right? The pleasure seekers. And then there's a second category, as he defines them, of people that are trying to produce happiness through accomplishment, right? And so they've looked at the world and they've decided like, well, obviously this is all, you know, time is so short. This is all about getting things done. You know, the more stuff I get done, the more things I check off my list, the more promotions I get, the more titles I acquire, the more degrees, the more home renovations, you know, the list is endless. The more things I do, the happier I am. Right? So that's category number two. And then category number three is this category of people that have lashed their happiness to their sense of meaning, to their sense of purpose. So think of the, civil rights activist. Like, man, they are not necessarily experiencing a lot of pleasure, right? That's a hard road. You know? They could spend decades, right, working on something and still feel like they're taking two steps back, right? There's still a tremendous amount of racial inequality in our society, certainly here in the United States, my goodness. You know, so they're certainly not going to be able to necessarily look back and be like, oh, look at everything I've accomplished with this life of civil rights activism. But what they care about, what they have decided is the most important, whether consciously or subconsciously, is that their life have meaning, that they put their energy, their limited time and energy, right? Life is so short, into what they care about the most. And in study after study after study, Dr. Seligman has seen that it is that third category of people that report the most happiness, that report the most sustained happiness, that report happiness even when they're in chronic pain, that report happiness even when they're suffering from chronic illness. And so this is what this insight is also being pointed to in our mindfulness practice. If I was, working some job for money right now, I probably wouldn't be sitting here, right? I would have woken up and been like, I got a cold. I feel terrible. I've been sniffling for days. I'm not going to do that. That sounds like a misery, right? And I'd be laying in bed. That's not how I live my life. Right? I'm sitting here because sharing these experiences, practicing mindfulness and community is the thing that is the most important to me. It's the thing that I care about the absolute most. And so, yeah, I feel kind of crappy right now. I'm not going to lie. No sense in starting to lie now. But I'm happy. I'm really happy to be here with you. This is going to be the highlight of my day. So when we go even a step deeper, right, into what this means, let's unpack this insight even a bit more. What it's talking about is healing. Is healing. Because we're all in pain, right? Whether you have a cold, as I do right now, or whether we're talking about the traumas of our childhoods, that produce these first thoughts. that produce these sometimes unbeneficial and unskillful habits. Nobody gets out of this game unscathed. The game of being a human being is rough and tumble. And so we're all here healing. But what is that? What is healing? I like the definition from the American Buddhist teacher, Jon Kabat-Zinn. He says it so simply: healing is coming to terms with what is. Healing is coming to terms with what is. And when I think about that, I'm a very visual person. It's one of the reasons I have a gigantic whiteboard at home, like 4 feet by 8 feet, because I like to visualize my ideas. And when I write that, which I do often on the board, right? Healing is coming to terms with what is. Right underneath it, I write healing equal sign with a line through it, right? Does not equal fixing. Healing does not equal fixing. Because if I'm walking around with this idea that healing equals fixing, then I will always be dissatisfied with my practice. I will always feel like my practice is not there when I need it the most. Right? I was asked this wonderful question by a new mindfulness practitioner, one of the teachers at this high school in Anchorage that I visited. And she raised her hand, and there's 100 people in the room, giant auditorium. And she was like, Brother Dave, I'm raising a teenager as a single parent, and sometimes things get really hectic, and I don't behave in the best way. Sometimes I don't respond in the most skillful or the most kind or the most calm way. And this is where I loved her question. It was so honest. My experience with these folks in Alaska is that they don't traffic in a lot of BS. And she was like, and people like you, tell me that in that moment I've got to be mindful. And I'm like, that's not helpful. That advice doesn't help, Dave. It was amazing. It was amazing too, because it's so true, right? It's so true. Like, imagine if I had been sitting there cross-legged on a cushion in that room with her and her, disruptive teen, and I had just said like, hey, take a few deep breaths, right? She probably would have thrown something at me. And so what I said to her was like, yes, you're 100% right. Like that's bad advice. Because that's not how this works, right? That's not how this works. If I hold the idea that because I'm a mindfulness practitioner, that I can fix myself in that moment and behave completely differently than decades of training and trauma and habit and repetition have developed me into, right? If I hold the idea that I can switch from first thought to second thought, right then when the stakes are that high and emotions are high, I will just always fail. That's not how this works. That's not how this works. What I can do in that moment is be overwhelmed by first thought, fall back onto the habits that I wish I could change but haven't yet been able to fully transform, be saying the unskillful thing, like, well, shut up, or whatever it is, and be aware. And be aware. And be accepting. Ooh, this is where I'm at right now. This is where this relationship is at. This is how skillful I am. This is how much pressure I'm under. Right? What I can do in that moment, which doesn't look like success from the outside at all, right? From the outside, it just looks like me being a jerk again. Right? But from the inside, if I am practicing my mindfulness, then I can be aware that all of that is happening and understand it. That healing is coming to terms with what is, which means healing is acceptance. It's acceptance. Right? And so if instead of looking in the mirror 30 seconds later after her teen storms out of the room, right? If instead of looking in the mirror, as I'm sure she has done a million times, and just be hard on herself, right? And be like, oh, you jerk, you did it again. You promised yourself you weren't going to yell. Here you go. You failure, right? That's the person who's attached in Dr. Seligman's model to success. Right? But if instead she reconnects with her deepest purpose, with what her life's meaning is in that moment, which is loving and understanding herself and her child, then we have a whole different framework to hold that exact same scenario in. And then she gets to be like, okay, that sucked. That was traumatic. I wish I had done better there. But I have another opportunity now to learn how to love and understand myself, because I behaved that way for a reason, for many reasons, right? I behaved that way maybe because I'm hungry right now, maybe because I'm so tired, because my job is stressful, maybe because we've had that argument a million times and I'm not arguing anymore about the specific instance, but I'm arguing about the 100 instances and the disappointment I'm carrying. Maybe, I responded that way because that was the relationship I had with my parent. Right? And on and on and on, right? Back to the beginning of our lives. And then we get a chance to actually heal, to look at ourselves in a loving way, even when we quote unquote done something wrong, and to increase our level of understanding. Understanding and love, right? Synonyms, as our teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, likes to say. Understanding and love are two words that mean exactly the same thing.